Okay, what I'm going to do here is I want to show you a different way of working with positioning. And so the first thing I want to take a look at is I have this page here. Has nothing on it right now, just has two images with some text. Okay, so the first thing I want to work with is, just because I want to show you some layering as well, is to kind of go in and kind of make some adjustments. So what I want you to do, and follow along, I'm going to include the data files. So I'm going to have you, go ahead and follow along so you can see it step by step as well. Copy, just type in the text and so forth. And so in this case, what I want to do first is I'm going to put a background image in. So I'm going to go in and I'm first going to take a look at my code here. I have it set up very similar to what we've worked with before. I have my header section. I have my wrapper up here, div ID. I have a header section. I have an article tag. In that article tag, I have two images. Now, I give it the source and then the class, okay, followed by a space and a slash. Now, each of the classes, I'm giving it a different name so I can apply a different style to each of those images. Here in the heading 1, I put in a class as well as the ID. Sometimes you got to put in class IDs because you might want to apply the same class format to other elements. And ID, you just want maybe you just want to adjust the styling for each one. And then of course I have a nav section, nothing major here. If I look at the positioning CSS, a couple things to point out is, see how I'm adding the style to the class called heading text. When I'm adding to a class, I start with a dot followed by heading, the name of the class. And this here is giving me the font size, the color. I'm adding a drop shadow, and that's why we see this little drop shadow here. It's a really nice feature. And of course, I'm using a different font family and working with that. So what I want to do is I'm going to put an image inside the background of the body. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the background hyphen image, and then what you're going to do is you got to tell it the URL. And the URL, you have to go in parentheses and inside quotation marks. It's just like the image source. You just type in images slash the name of the image. And it is case sensitive. You got to make sure you automatically adjust for that. When you add a background image, it automatically excuse me, repeats within a section. So if this graphic I've created is large, okay, so if I go and take a look at this, this is a large size graphic that we're placing in, okay, and I can actually look at the properties. I can go to details. I can see it's 960 by 600, so it's huge, okay. So I'm turning on the background repeat, and I'm going to say no repeat, because if I don't, if my browser is larger, you'll see actually multiple images of that tiled in, and that's how the background image works. And in this case, I'm just going to go in and make sure the width of the body is 960, and I have overflow turn on. So if the image happens to be a little bit larger than 960, it actually will hide anything outside of that container. So when I save this, and this is what I want you to do, is add to your style sheet, add into the position CSS, add background hyphen image, and exactly what you have here, what I have here. So that way you can get a better control. Now what I like to do is when I make a change, I automatically will save it and then I refresh the page. So if I come back over here, notice I refreshed. And then you can see the navigation bar down here works. I place in the navigation bar to place in there. Now, what I want to do is, I don't like the positioning of the text in the clouds. So what I want to do is I want to physically move this around so it fits within my space. Now again, notice again, this is a width of 960. Now if we want to center this and so forth, we can do that. That's not a big issue. I can add the wrapper option and go in. I could actually add it right here in the body as well. So I mean, a lot of times you can just do margin hyphen left, auto, margin hyphen right. Either you're going to add this to the wrapper or you're going to add it to the body. So when I save that, it's going to center stuff, into that. Now in this case, I don't want to do this because it's going to move my text around and leaves the background image the way it is. So I'm going to delete that, but it is something that you could do. Okay. Now, what I want to do now, okay, is I want to physically control and change the positioning of the image. Now, when you put a background image in, this is kind of creating like a layer. So the background image is always going to be behind everything. So everything on top of it, in your container, any of your containers is going to be on top. And so you can physically move those into different positions. So the background image is is stuck, I would say. It's locked unless you change the positioning, because you can change it in the style sheet if you wanted to. So now what I want you to do is let's just manipulate one of the clouds here. Okay, and so I'm going to come back in and I'm going to look. I'm going to go in and I'm going to affect the cloud 1. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go up down here and I'm going to turn on position relative. Relative to its position, adjust it. So it's already in a certain place. So all I want to do is just move it around a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and let's move it from the top 1,000 pixels. Let's just see what happens. Where did the cloud go? The cloud went actually outside of my container. Okay, from the top it went outside the container, and since we turn on overflow hidden, it's going to hide it so you won't be able to see it. That 1,000 is just too much. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in. Let's just change it to 300 from the top. Okay, and we'll refresh. See, it's down here at the bottom. Right here, it's coming up because and so what we're doing here is we're physically going in and controlling this. Let's do 100. See how you moved it down? Let's take this one here, and I'm going to go in. I'm going to go to cloud 2. I'm going to turn on its position relative to where it is. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to say left. Well, actually, let's do right side because I want it on the right side. And I'm going to say 100 pixels. And let's say from the top, let's go down 50 pixels. Now watch this right here. I'm going to press my enter key. And actually, let's just make one more adjustment because I forgot it made an adjustment with that. Let's do a left and we'll do 1,000. Or actually, not 1,000, but let's do 700. Okay, now actually it went too far over, and that's where you have to experiment. Okay, it's all about experimenting here. And so a lot of times what the key here is just understand, let's do left 300, and there it is, it's moved over. Now you might even like it the way it is with that cloud right above it. So what I'm doing here is I'm just basically going in and I can control the style and the positioning of this. So now let's take that heading and add position relative. Okay. Once we turn it on, that's when we can use top, left, bottom, and so forth. Let's do top. Let's see here. Let's do from the top. Let's do 75 pixels. and left, let's do 150 pixels. I'm going to save that. I'm going to refresh. Now, it's relative from where it's positioning. It's relative where it's positioned. So it's coming in after this cloud. And so it's going to go in from that position where the tag is added. It's going to go from that down and over to the right. Now, if you want to make sure it's anywhere on this screen, okay, then you can switch to position absolute instead. Okay, I'm going to save that, and when I look at this, it's going to take a look at the window and it's going to move the text up. Now it's going to cause an issue with your navigation bar, okay, because there's some other things going on with that. But you have it can get tricky here when you're working with this, and so it is kind of, you have to kind of have it planned out. What I want you to do is I want you to do some experimenting. Okay, so here in this case I'm going to change it back to relative. Now let's say I want to move, let me go ahead and save this. I'm going to refresh this. I want to move the cloud design text upward because it's taking where I'm starting at. So what I'm going to do is I'm back to relative. If I want to move it upwards, I went to the top. Top is going from that standpoint where the code is, and from the top of that code down. So I want to move it past upwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a negative value here, and we're going to do negative 200. Okay, when I save it and I refresh, and actually I went too far, I'm sorry. I'm going to undo that and come up here to the heading text, and I'm going to do negative. And so in this case, what I'm going to do now is refresh, and you can see the text is being moved up. Okay, so what you kind of have to look at is where your elements are placed in. There's kind of like a box around that element. So in theory, let me just go in and show I can do it right here in PowerPoint. Okay, when your element is placed into the page, there's this invisible box typically around this. Okay, and I'm just going to draw myself a box, a shape, a rectangle. And so it's placed in, and again, you can put a border around the box if you want to. You can do some other things to it. But where it's placed in, your HTML code, it places it where it sees on the page and places it there. That top corner, when we go and start using position relative, what you're saying is that if you say you want to move it from the top down, then what's going to happen here is it's going to actually take a look. I'm going to draw another line here. Just take a line tool, and here's the top. And so it's going to move it down from the top depending on the pixels. So like here I might brought it down 50 pixels. So if you're going to tell it to move over to the left, then the starting point is going to, you have to know where the starting point of the image or the element is. And when you use position relative, it automatically will know that starting point. Now, what's really nice about this is that negative value, because sometimes you got to force it in different locations. So like again, let's go back here. I want to move the clouds up, this cloud up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my brackets. I'm going to choose the top here, and I'm going to do negative 50. And it moved it right up there. Might be too far, so negative 20. Negative 10. Okay. Well, if you want to, what's really nice about this, and then once you know the negative value, see, you can go upwards, you can go to the left, you can go to the right, outside of that box area. So Let's go back in. If I want to, I can say, okay, from the left, 200 px. See, I'm moving it in. Trying to put the two clouds right above the text. Okay. Now, again, lastly, down here, notice how my navigation bar is over top of this green area? Well, that's because I have position relative turned on. So notice here I have position relative and I say bottom negative 90. So I'm going to delete this out real quick. I'm going to save it. I'm going to refresh. Okay. Notice my navigation bar is moved up because what you have to understand is it doesn't know where the bottom of the background image is. It doesn't know that. Okay. It is placing the navigation bar in an area based on where you typed your code. So if I go back here into the positioning, it says, okay, I have a nav section in the footer and it's going to appear right after my article. Well, it did. It appeared right after the article tag. Okay, there's a block, if we look at an invisible box here, there is an invisible box. So what I did is if I know about positioning, all I did was turn on my relative. I told it to go in from the bottom. So I wanted to go into and outside of that. I just changed the bottom to be negative 90. And that will force it into this green area down here at the bottom. Because I wanted it to kind of stand out. And so I thought that area down there really worked well.